now, later, or whenever. I'm going to give it a couple seconds to catch up here, and then do our normal intro and talk some WonderCon schedules here. All right, ready? All right, welcome to Parks and Cons, companion podcast of the parksandcons.com website and YouTube channel, where we discuss cons, theme parks, collecting, and other fun stuff. It's March 18th, 2022. I'm your host, Sean. I'm here with Carmel.
Hi there.
Parks and Cons, your on-the-spot podcast. We take it to heart of the actual best conventions and themed entertainment events around. Today we are recording right in front of the fountains at the Anaheim Convention Center. If you're somebody checking in with us on YouTube, you will see that. If you watch along at any point, you'll see the fountains behind us in the convention center. No big DC banners up there. May not be any big DC banners up there at all this year. We'll get to that in a little bit. But for those of you listening audio, it'll be a standard type of a podcast there, except the big difference is we haven't recorded this podcast ever before, and we were talking about WonderCon. Obviously with the pandemic and having time to think on things, this was one of the things of like, well, let's take time whenever the schedule comes out, if we can, and get out here. Unfortunately, we were able to work things out today to get out here and talk some WonderCon. So it is surreal being here, because this is one of those weird points in time, I think, in spring, because obviously WonderCon was like, for us, the big convention that fell right as the pandemic came and it was taken off the map. We were at San Diego Comic Fest and David Glanzer was there and talking about, WonderCon was going to happen, and we were like, yeah, these are kind of weird times. This was March 7th at the time. And then just a week later, March 13th, everything got closed down and everything changed. And there hasn't been a WonderCon since 2019, which is crazy. That's been 3 years since we've been at the show. And so very, very excited to have it return. We know it'll be a different type of year. Everything's different right now while things are kind of eking back open. But hopefully we'll be able to share some fun stuff here. Hey, Andrew, nice to catch it live. It says nice to see you here. We always appreciate your support. So it's awesome. I mean, like, just being in front of the fountains and stuff and knowing that literally 2 weeks from right now, this place will be packed with cosplayers and it will be packed with people having a wonderful time. I'm sure it'll be a much smaller attended show than normal, but it definitely will be a awesome show, or at least I think. I know we're very optimistic about it.
Hi, Drew, by the way. Yeah, definitely. Now, just as a heads up, we've both been recovering from like a stomach flu thing that I blame Sean for, because he got sick first and then I was recovering. So if we seem a little out of it or miss a few things, bear with us. We're both mostly recovered, but I feel like my head isn't completely on all cylinders. So yeah, bear with us. Excuse us if we do miss anything, overlook anything, or anything like that, because yeah, we're both recovering, and surprisingly not a COVID thing, just a stomach flu thing, which obviously still happens in the world. And so
yeah, I learned just about everybody I worked with seemed to have had some sort of bug, and at one point it hit me and then it hit us. And so, but yeah, so it was a few days of not really eating, so still kind of getting our brains back together. And also, it's a different type of show than we normally do, so please bear with us as we go through. In that vein, actually, as you look, if you are attending WonderCon, you know probably that the schedule looks a little bit different, just in terms of the platform that CCI Comic-Con International is using here with Evently. It's, my schedule is gone right now, and there's so many changes. I mean, that's a whole nother topic, but as we look at like Comic-Con, I mean, I was just thinking about and talking to people yesterday of like the idea that right now when you like pre-order something from Hasbro, a lot of it is like saying, well, we'll ship it to you in like summer of 23, so it's like, are we going to get, bags full of receipts for things and not actual items at Comic-Con for some of these exclusives? And so we'll see what happens with all of that, and obviously we'll talk about that, but just we can expect some differences, and definitely the schedule itself and kind of breaking it down is a little different. We actually printed it in old-fashioned hard copy form here and have our pens and paper just to kind of make some sense of it. But the show does begin on Friday, as I said, 2 weeks from today. And the hours, I just pulled that up just so we have that. Whoops. It's 10:30 a.m. I believe is opening time on the first day there. Yeah. 11:30 is the exhibit hall. Registration badge openings at 9 a.m. that morning. And of course, you can pick up your badges a day early at 9 a.m. It begins actually on or 12 p.m. on the Thursday. But Friday, hall opens 11:30 a.m. and the panels start. A lot of gaming is available early on in the day. As we go through the schedule, we're just kind of highlighting things that jump out to us. So we're not going to like go through every single thing. We're also not doing full room breakdowns. North 200B and 200A are the big rooms. Important to note, they're not using the arena this year, and so that is a pretty big loss. The arena, one of the things we've always liked about the Anaheim conventions is that arena really is able to pack it in. So
it's been cool with the arena panels because lots of times they wouldn't fill up, so we could wander over as they were starting, or even after they started, depending on what we had going on. So yeah, obviously for a Star Wars celebration, there were some panels where it was at capacity.
D23 gets packed and all that.
Yeah, but for WonderCon, usually we'd be able to wander in at whatever point, but not the case this year, which kind of sucks because I do like being in the arena, but oh well.
Yeah, and so 200A, 200B, they do not have, if you go to visitanaheim.org, you can find like the listings of room numbers, because for something like San Diego Comic-Con, I think are kind of used to like, okay, this is about how many fit in ballroom 20, this is how many hall H, but we had to kind of look this up and do a little bit of digging on these. And so 200A and 200B, these are in the north building. This is where like Spotlight on Jim Lee was in 2019, or 80 years of Batman, or things like that. So some of those bigger panels, but not quite the Hollywood stuff, which they then had in the arena instead. This time Hollywood will be coming to the 200A and 200B. We're figuring the seating for those is going to be somewhere in the 1,000 to 1,500 area. And so I would imagine something like when we get to the Bob's Burgers panel for the movie on Sunday, it's going to probably be pretty competitive to get in there, but we'll get to that. But the first panel that I think did kind of catch our eye, or at least caught my eye, is not there. It's in a much smaller room. I believe it's about a 300-seater there. Is room 209 at 3 p.m. on the Friday, is Adora and the Distance with Mark Bernardin. And I love one of the quotes just when I was looking up, says it's a magical love letter about adventure and autism. And so I know Mark Bernardin, he's currently a supervising producer on Star Trek's Picard. He's written for Castle Rock and just a number of different things. He co-hosts Batman Beyond with Kevin Smith, but one of his children has autism, and he talks about kind of the, trying to relate to the world that they live in. And so he wrote this, book, specifically this graphic novel, to kind of try to tell that adventure story and kind of give that population a voice. And so I have wanted to pick it up for a while. He's been talking about it on the podcast and stuff, and I thought, hopefully it'll be at a con that we'll see. I'm always really big on, loving to try to buy the book directly from the hands of people when possible, creators. So I love that he's going to be out here and going to be able to showcase that. So that's going to be, again, it's at the 3 o'clock in room 209 on the Friday. Same time, behind the scenes with the Borg Queen from Star Trek Picard. This is in room 200B, so this is one of those larger rooms, and this is the type of one that I think like that's going to be perfect. I would imagine that, let's say it's 1,000 people seated in there. I would imagine for this type of very specific panel, that's going to be quite okay, and I don't feel like we're going to have to line up early. And I know if you followed along with us for the conventions in the past, I mean, Carmel is big on panels. I'm much lesser on panels. I have a really hard time, like when I'm not on the floor, I can do like an hour at a time and stuff like that. But when you weigh in the waiting in line time, I don't know for behind the scenes. I mean, you're a bigger, I mean, I'm a huge Star Trek fan, but you're a bigger Star Trek fan for me. I mean, how long would you be willing to wait in line for the Borg Queen here?
I would probably be willing to, I don't know, go into the panel room, maybe the panel before, because CCI traditionally does not clear out rooms.
Correct.
So you can go in the panel before. So I would totally be up for that, I think, for this type of panel. Now, though, a caveat to that, though, and I would need to read the description closer, it seems that there's a little, I don't know, the language is kind of funny on some of the panels, and I don't know if this is one of them or not, but it seems that some of the panels in the bigger rooms, or I guess maybe in all the rooms, might have virtual aspects to it. So it seems that some of the panels we're going to be watching like a pre-recorded panel or pre-recorded questions. So if that's the case, I'm really not so much interested in it. But if this is a panel that the people are going to be there live and it's not going to be watching a monitor, yeah, I would be totally up for going in the panel before and hanging out through until that panel. But if it comes about that it's going to be a virtual thing or I'm just going to be watching a screen, I probably won't even bother going to it, which is going to be the case for most of them. But so yeah, just a heads up, kind of read the descriptions carefully on the panels that you care about.
Yeah, so that's a good point. So as we are recording this, it is 2:44 Pacific on the Friday. The schedule was released just a few hours ago. At the time the schedule came out, every single one, at least on the mobile, which is where I was, had underneath the room number, it said virtual panel. And so I was wondering, like, are all of these going to be virtual? And then that seemed to be taken away and disappeared off of it. So I think maybe that was just something that was left from maybe WonderCon virtual 2021. But there was the tweet just a little bit ago, and I saw our friends over at the SDCC unofficial blog had retweeted it there, and it's an important one. This is from Tara Bennett, who is working with a panel with Fear the Walking Dead, and that's one of the panels here. And she tweeted, an in-person virtual WonderCon is happening this year. If you're attending one way or another and love Fear the Walking Dead, check out the virtual panel I moderate with the EPs and cast. I can tease there's a lot to see. And she confirmed that it is a virtual, that's a pre-recorded panel. So yeah, mileage may vary on that. We'll see as the show, unfolds. And so a good point on that. Yeah, like if they're there, I'm in. And you and I weren't big on virtual panels at any point during the pandemic. It just never really clicked. I mean, not that we didn't watch some, but it just never, we tried really hard actually to like some of them, it just didn't really click. So it's a good question with all of these, because I kind of think we'll get to the Lois and Superman one. I kind of think that one's going to be a pre-recorded all video as well, and I don't know if that's the case, but that would be my guess as of, again, Friday afternoon, 2 weeks from the show.
Now, Andrew commented that a lot of the descriptions are pretty light and that they should at least tell you who's on the panel. I totally agree with that. Maybe more information will come as it gets closer, but in general, I think before committing a lot of time to any particular panel, maybe read the most recent information on the schedule, and maybe go to social media for the people who might be on that panel and see if they provide any information. But I mean, if you're fine with just being in a room with a bunch of other fans and watching things virtually, then you don't need to worry about it. But for me personally, I'm not a big fan of that, so I won't be committing probably any time to panels that I know ahead of time are going to be virtual.
Yeah, the thing that excites me most about WonderCon is being on the floor and seeing a lot of people. And so yeah, anything, and probably those virtual ones will be able to be streamed later if I really need to see it. So on this Borg Queen one, it says actress Annie Wershing, who brilliantly brings new life to the Borg Queen in season 2 of Star Trek Picard, discusses what it was like taking on the iconic role. She'll be joined by Emmy award-winning prosthetic makeup team from the show, including James McKinnon, designer and department head for prosthetics, and Neville Page, senior creative designer, who designed and created Borg Queen. So we shall see where that goes, but it definitely has caught our eye, and it stays. I'm glad that there's a few things that are catching our attention already on Friday, because also again in that 3 to 4, this is actually 3:30 to 4:30. Much smaller room again. This is room 208. But the spotlight on Sarah Kuhn. She's done some incredible stuff. I mean, she was Hugo nominated for Chicks Dig Comics, but she worked on the Dr. Aphra audio drama that came out, I believe it was summer of 2020 or something like that. She's worked on Batgirl, and I love she's worked on things like Clueless, like extending the Clueless, the film universe, Barbie. She's just had a really eclectic background, and I think you can definitely see very noticeably, I think, in the schedule, I feel like there's a bigger push than ever for female creators to come forward, and so we've highlighted just a couple of them, but it's really neat to see, somebody with such a diverse background that's going to have this spotlight, be able to talk about her career and kind of what it's been to work in the comics industry during a time of a lot of change, obviously, and so continued change. But that is 3:30 to 4:30 there on Friday. Let's see, what else was grabbing our attention there on Friday? 6 to 7. This will probably be one of those must-sees for me, because I'm just a real homer for the Toys That Made Us, the Nacelle Company, all of them, a toy store near you, if you're familiar with Movies That Made Us. The guys behind that, Brian Volkweiss, particularly that kind of universe of work. Whenever they do a panel, I mean, we've seen them at so many different conventions, and they're always talking about something new. And this one is, it's called Nacelle, Your New Toy Company, and
Favorite
or
toy
new
company.
toy favorite. Yeah. So at Comic-Con Special Edition, they introduced the idea there of, I mean, that was the first time I think they had a panel that wasn't about just the production side of things, of the series, streaming series and things like that. This was the first time that they kind of moved away from that docu-series world and talked about producing toys. They have their toy passport, which I absolutely love that idea. And if you watch Toy Store Near You, they began that during the pandemic to try to give toy stores, vintage toy stores across the globe, a way to kind of reach out and tell their story a little bit. And they had a really ingenious way of kind of packing these kits of cameras, sending them to the toy store, so the toy store owners became their own kind of producers, directors, on-air talent, and then getting it back to them, and they air that on Amazon. And so that's one of those free things with Amazon Prime if you're a member there. But at Special Edition, they talked about introducing kind of that world of, or I shouldn't say introducing, but bringing back a lot of famous toy lines, or at least a few famous toy lines. And David Bonner, who is of Marvel fame, if you like the rocker ankles, if you've ever had some action figures, Marvel Legends and Marvel Universe figures in the last decade or so, they call them the Bonner ankles. He was the one that kind of introduced the Spidey ankle that can kind of go back and forth, which probably for kids right now seems, well, how would you ever have figures? But for those of us that had maybe Kenner Star Wars figures or things of that nature, we know that ankles moving is a relatively new thing in the toy industry. But David Bonner joined them, and he was super passionate, and we talked about that. They're going to be talking about Power Lords, Robo Force, and then Marks. And Marks is particularly of interest to me. Not that I'm not interested in the others, but they talked about the other ones at Comic-Con Special Edition, and it was fantastic. But Marks, these were like the old 1940s, 1950s tin like forts that you could buy with the static little figures of cowboys and Indians and army men and things like that.
Didn't we just see some at
You saw
the West
the
Coast?
Zorro one is like a Zorro one is one of those holy grails. It's like $1,000 toy now, but they did all of that. But they also did, if you are a Disney fan, you may be familiar with, they're about maybe 5-inch tall. Again, static plastic kind of molded figures that are just like of colorway. So it's like, they have Pinocchio, and there's a red one and a green one and a yellow one, and they're just these static figures. And so I'm really curious to see what they're doing with that line, what they're doing with that company, and kind of how they're going to use Marks and what parts of Marks they're going to, bring back to life here. So that will be a must for me in the kind of later parts of the day there. Also on Friday, 7:30, Kevin Smith has this panel. And so a classic to end the con day in Hall H over in, Saturdays, I guess? Yeah, Saturdays over at Comic-Con in San Diego. But ending Friday here, North 200A. So again, one of the larger rooms, and there's not a lot of info on what it's going to be. I mean, I would imagine it is a Kevin Smith panel, which is him telling stories, and I mean, that's so much of his life now outside of filmmaking is telling stories from the sets, taking questions from the audience, and I'm excited to see him back out in the world as well, because he is somebody that we watched a lot of their podcasts, when they would YouTube live stream them and things like that, from Scum and Villainy over in LA, The Journey. There's some of these people like Conan, his journey on TV and kind of being isolated at home, and then eventually getting to the Largo Theater and being to an empty audience, and then eventually, he retired. But Kevin Smith kind of going through his phases from home to an empty Scum and Villainy to an audience Scum and Villainy. It was just kind of nice seeing some people go through the journey with us, I felt like. And so I am anxious to see him in person. I don't know if that's going to be too packed of a panel on Friday night, but I tend to think we'd be able to find a seat in there if we want to.
I tend to think so. I mean, later on the Friday night, I don't know that the panels are super crowded at that point usually. And obviously Hall H is much bigger than North 200A, but yeah, I hope we'd be able to get in there without too much trouble. And he also, the new movie is coming, Clerks, right? Clerks 3, I think, is coming out later this year, so I'd imagine he'll be talking about that. And then he's obviously had lots of different projects and stuff that he talks about. So Yeah, I think that'd be a fun one to go to. I mean, it's always such a relaxed environment, at least when we've gone on these panels at Comic Con. Because he's just vamping, he's just talking, he's just, you know, talking about life and whatever's going on. So pretty relaxed. So yeah, I could imagine we'll be able to get in there. And we've talked about it before. Panels we're usually not. We don't fight too much to like be way up front. We don't spend usually, unless it's an important panel to us, we don't spend a lot of time waiting for panels in general. So hopefully this one will be one that works out okay and we're able to go to, and I imagine it will be.
All right, so next up, it looks like this one is in 207, which looks like it seats about 188 people in that neighborhood there, if I'm reading the website correctly here. But that one, bringing Spider-Man and Batman to life through VFX, which that sounds like a really small room there for that level of interest, because this feels like it's in the vein of something like the Board Queen type of thing, where a lot of people might be interested in this, even though it's not, I mean, it's not going to be, you know, Tom Holland and Tobey Maguire and Andrew Garfield there, but still, this seems like this could be a busier panel than maybe we're missing, but that's what 207 reads on the Visit Anaheim site. So it says filmmakers from VFX studio Crafty Apes, Andrew Kalicki, visual effects producer on The Batman, Bobby Tucker, visual effects producer on Spider-Man No Way Home, John Lacrosse, visual effects supervisor on Moon Knight, John Brubaker, visual effects supervisor on The Batman, and John Balcombe, CG supervisor Spider-Man No Way Home, provide fans with the ultimate experience by diving into the creation of iconic superhero films and take the audience through a behind-the-scenes journey into the action. That sounds like fascinating. That is a collection, and you and I are always big fans of like those behind-the-scene type panels and the writers, the producers, the technical side. And so this is at 10 a.m., so it's an early one. 207. I don't know, maybe 10 a.m. on Saturday, maybe it's not going to be that crowded, because a lot of people are getting there. I know me, I'm having a hard time not doing the floor first anyway, but a lot of people probably getting there a little late on Saturday. Maybe it's not going to be as busy as I think, but it seems like it could be a quite busy one.
Yeah, I don't know, a room that small, it really caught my attention because, as you said, I do kind of like hearing the behind-the-scenes stuff and about the creatives that work on the stuff behind all that, and so I can't imagine that this is one that we're actually going to go to, because you have such an itch to be on the floor, especially first thing in the morning, and so I don't actually think we'll end up going to this one, but it's one that if it were later in the day, I think we definitely would consider it, especially if it's, you know, taking a break. But it does sound cool, and I don't know what kind of turnout it's going to have at that hour at 10 o'clock on a Saturday.
Well,
but it's definitely of interest to me.
As much as I enjoyed The Batman and Spider-Man No Way Home, which I did a lot, both of them, Moon Knight, you know, you say Moon Knight, you have my attention. So Moon Knight, I did not think I would ever live in a world where there'd be a Moon Knight series. And I'm sure people listening to this can, you know, feel that. So that sparks my attention immediately. So I don't know. Now maybe too, so it says it's room 207 on Comic-Con's WonderCon programming. When you go to the Visit Anaheim site, there isn't a 207. There's a 207A, B, C, D. Then there's a 207AB and a 207ABC. So maybe this is supposed to be 207 ABC, in which case it'd be 564 people that it seats. So not positive, but I think no matter what, you know, these numbers are so relative with everything. Because as we always talk about, it's always about like the popularity of the panels before, after, room, floor density. Like there's so many factors that can make it kind of crazy, or not crazy. And so I don't know, but I definitely think it'll be worth a check. So we'll see. But very strong to me start on Saturday. Now I think this is going to be one of the panels of the weekend for a lot of people. And again, though, I think it's going to depend whether this is a virtual thing or what it is. But that is Superman and Lois. It's a special video presentation and Q&A. So the way I read that, especially with the knowledge from what the Fear the Walking Dead was tweeted earlier today from their panel, is this, now as I read it now, it seems like it definitely is a video presentation. I mean, it says in the title, special video presentation and Q&A. Now Q&A, so I wouldn't be surprised if there's a Zoom component to it or something of that nature, which makes it different than just a pre-recorded thing.
Well, I mean, during some of the virtual panels during the pandemic,
Oh,
they
yeah.
did get the questions from people ahead of time, and it all was pre-recording the
Great
Q&A part. So I don't know, but yeah, that one, I don't know if the Q&A will be a live situation and live either in person. It doesn't seem like it's going to be in person, or if it's going to be like a live Zoom. But my guess is that it's going to be a pre-recorded Q&A, that they got the questions from somewhere ahead of time and have probably already recorded it. So I don't know. We'll see. I don't know if you have the description there, if it goes into any more specifics than that.
I mean, in the final episode of season 1, Superman defeated his brother and was able to stop him from placing Kryptonian consciousness in the people of Smallville. In season 2, so it's a lot of that. Later on, it gets to, so it's just kind of a summary of the show, and it says, see a special video presentation followed by a Q&A with the executive producer and series stars, participants to be determined, of Superman and Lois at the WonderCon debut. And then it has a list of all the cast that could be, or that is on the show, all the writers. So it has a really long list of people that have been involved in the production of the show, but we don't know any of them that will be in it. So,
I think on this one is one that will benefit going to social media of the specific actors or companies or specific people involved, and see if any of them are saying that they're going to be at WonderCon, and if so, then they'll probably be in the panel. If they're not, or they flat out say they're not coming, well, then that kind of gives that answer. But it does definitely seem like it's going to be a all pre-recorded experience.
And this is probably a good point to mention, like, this is where that social media comes in again, like flashing back to our Comic-Con days and things like that, this is where, if you're in the panel room, maybe tweet it out, and, you can tag us, tag the SDCC unofficial blog, and I'm sure you'll get, a retweet, and it helps share the information, and people know, like, hey, let's head over, there's room in here, and, Tyler Hoechlin's here, Superman's standing up on stage, or it's all video, or just the producers here. I think that's where a lot of times that sharing of info, it's why Twitter's so valuable during the conventions over really any other form of social media in that real-time kind of universe of cons.
Well, definitely, because it doesn't have the same algorithms that some of the other platforms have, where you don't even get to see things unless you specifically look them up. So yeah, definitely Twitter is very valuable in the convention world. And obviously, the more that people share the information, the more helpful it is. And I don't know, it's kind of weird. In pre-pandemic times, I might have been more apt to think, well, maybe there'll be a surprise guest, or maybe there'll be a surprise visit from someone or something. But it seems like the surprises aren't going to be as prevalent, probably. Just like at Special Edition back in November, the only surprise,
that was a big surprise.
And it was a huge surprise, was when John Cena showed up to the masquerade, and then did the off-site photo shoot that we were able to see, and there just weren't that many people there because people weren't expecting that. But yeah, I don't know that there's going to be as many surprises for WonderCon as there might have been in the past. And really, in the past, there hasn't been a ton of surprises for WonderCon. It's more of a Comic-Con thing. But yeah, I think we all need to. I think if we all go in with kind of tempered expectations, lower expectations, if there are any surprises, then they'll be amplified that much more. But I think we all need to be prepared for, I don't know, I guess, brace ourselves for like a lesser experience, but hope that it's a much bigger experience than where some things seem like they are leading us to believe, I guess.
Yeah, and I think, a lot of all these events, especially in 22, I think for me, it's always like, I think about 1 year ago where things were. So, 1 year ago, there wasn't a WonderCon. There was, there wasn't much of anything at that time. There was still, I don't know if exactly to this date, but there was, you weren't allowed to eat outside at In-N-Out in parts of at least March in California this time last year. So it's a different world, but it's going to take some time to get back to, maybe the Avengers assembling on the stage at Comic-Con. And who knows, maybe not. Maybe it will happen this summer. I think Star Wars Celebration will be a really interesting show because Disney has all the reason. They can control everything. I think if they come out and do a really big showing in a lot of ways, it's going to encourage a lot of companies to do a lot of different things. But I think there's a lot of great things here that also are very encouraging. Around that similar time there on Saturday, 2:30 to 3:30, and I think this will definitely be a live panel because we've seen these guests at a con already this year in person. So this is the X-Men 30th anniversary celebration of the animated series, and that's going to be in North 200B. I think that's like the perfect size for that room. There's a lot of heat on X-Men animated. There's obviously a lot of nostalgia for it. There's also a lot of heat with the announcement that there will be a continuance of the series over on Disney Plus. So I think it is in the forefront. It is awesome to see Eric Lewald and Julia Lewald getting all that extra love right now because they have been on the convention circuit. We were seeing them at shrine shows like 10, 15 years ago. You know, still giving the love for that. We sat down and we talked with Julia. We actually shared a table with Julia. I don't know if you remember this at the Funimation party at the old Gas Lamp Strip Club Steakhouse years ago at Comic-Con, and we talked a little bit and stuff there. Very, very, very nice people. That says fans cannot forget the opening theme of the '92 X-Men the Animated Series and the excitement of watching their favorite Marvel team. Jessica Sang, international comics historian and AMC Secret History of Comics, discusses with Eric Lewald and Julia Lewald, showrunners of X-Men the Animated Series and authors of X-Men, the art and making of the animated series, why the show is so well loved, its legacy led to toys still being made to this day, and fandom forums always buzzing that they'll take us into a deep dive into the critically acclaimed book, their time on the show and what made it a classic, and the appreciation of all things X-Men. So again, we saw them just at LA Comic-Con not long ago, so I would be shocked if they're not there in person, and I think that's going to be a really fun panel, and I think there's going to be a level of excitement there with, you know, they're in the big room at a big con. I love that. Again, like we've seen them, as I said, at the shrine, and people are coming to their table, but having them have a big platform like that, I think is super cool, and I hope a lot of people come out and support that panel.
So it's a panel at 2:30 on Saturday. Do you think you'll be ready at that point to take a break and go to a panel versus staying on the floor?
Yeah, definitely.
And then if so, how much time are you willing to commit for that panel?
Well, I just want them to have a full room. I don't need to wait in a long line for it, so I can just get there right at the start. It's not that big of a deal to me to give up the whole afternoon or anything like that in line. But I do hope it's not like, you know, 30 people there, and I don't think it will be. But I just think that, you know, again, I just love that they're getting the attention because I feel like they've really beat that drum for that X-Men animated series. And Southern California convention goers, I'm sure you've come across them. I'm sure, you know, maybe you've talked to them or get their autograph or things like that. But they're very passionate about what they worked on, and to see it being recognized, which that is one of the cool things, I think, of all the terrible things in the world we live in. I mean, there's so many rough things going on in the world around us. But then when we turn to this world of pop culture for distraction for a moment, there's all these people that, you know, so many of us loved as children. Now, for me, X-Men 90s is later. That's like a high school thing, so I wasn't into it so much in the 90s. I came to it a bit later. But it's just great to see the things that we love, the people that we love doing the things that created, getting recognition now. And it may have taken 20 years or 30 years to get it, but now we live in a world where people look back and say, hey, yeah, I love that thing you worked on 30 years ago. It's a shame maybe it took that long to get that level of recognition, but I do love that that's part of kind of this streaming universe that we are in there. Okay, so staying on Saturday, then we'll come to that.
Really quick, Andrew commented that he thinks that you can all hear that X-Men theme in our heads right now.
Oh yeah,
it's a good theme.
Yeah. You cannot escape that theme. It is it's classic. Yeah, it really was an instant classic, and it remains a classic now. Okay, so later on day 4:30. So now we know what this panel is. This is the Fear the Walking Dead panel. So obviously, Fear the Walking Dead universe as a whole has a big following. Fear the Walking Dead is the only of the Walking Dead shows I've not stuck with. I still enjoy Walking Dead. I know a lot of people have fallen off Walking Dead. I know a lot of people still love Walking Dead as well. I also enjoyed, what was it, World Beyond or whatever it was called as an addition. But Fear never connected with me, so that's not one that would jump out to me. You watched it, but then kind of fell off of it there.
I think I watched like the first 2 seasons or so, but I wasn't very committed to it, and it was a tough watch for me. But yeah, there is a panel at 4:30 on Saturday, but as we mentioned before, we have an idea that this is one of those ones that's not going to be a live discussion.
Yeah, it is pre-recorded. I mean, as we talked about earlier, like that's just not going to happen. So now that said, they have said, hey, it's going to be exciting. There's going to be some cool stuff shared there for fans, and so there is definitely a value of being in the room and having that shared experience. I mean, still one of kind of a great convention experience was right here at the convention center in the dungeon, waiting for, what was it, Star Wars Celebration 2015 to open and having the Force Awakens trailer play and the Chewie we're home moment, and everybody's like sobbing everywhere, and we're all just sitting on this hard cold floor in the most
watching our phones because we weren't in the panel.
Yeah, we weren't
near the panel room because that got full very quick. We were just in line basically waiting to get on the floor, and everybody's like watching on their phones and stuff, the preview. And once it hit that point, it was very
so there is
emotional.
such a value in shared experiences. So I think that is one thing on these, virtual ones maybe that we have to remember with those is, it may not connect for you and I specifically, like talking about Fear the Walking Dead, but there's a lot of value. I mean, just going back to Spider-Man No Way Home, seeing it there, and no spoilers for people that maybe haven't been able to see it yet, but seeing that in a shared experience with that audience was incredible. And pretty much most of our friends that saw it that way were like, yeah, at that time, everybody in the audience did this, and it's like, yeah, there's something. So, Fear the Walking Dead, it is going to be virtual. It is going to be something where you're watching a screen, but you are going to be surrounded by a bunch of people that love Fear the Walking Dead. I don't think there's going to be anybody in that room that's not a hardcore fan, and that has its own value, particularly after a year, or more than a year, obviously, a couple of years here of not being able to be in spaces a lot of times with people and sharing that kind of love and passion that is the reason people buy tickets to these pop culture events in the first place. A little bit later, 5 p.m., Art as a Career with Babs Char also really caught my attention. I love some of her artwork, particularly some of her interpretations of Batgirl. I think have been a lot of fun. And I think also just that she, for a lot of people, she has become kind of their image of Batgirl in their head. I think it's kind of interesting. We're in a time where there is a Batgirl film being worked on. I mean, it seems like there's always a Batgirl film being worked on for the last decade or something like that, but it seems like it's going to happen now. It's going to come to HBO Max. And, all of these characters have their breakthrough moments where they have all of a sudden captured everybody's attention. So, now Jason Momoa is people's Aquaman. And there was a time that, the Super Friends and Robot Chicken's Aquaman was everybody's Aquaman, And so I just think it's kind of an interesting time, and I think it's an interesting person to have on a panel here and talking about, again, her art, her career as an artist, and how she's kind of come to be in the place she is. I think it's got to be an exciting time for her to kind of see the stuff she's worked on and know that, again, it's going to be celebrated probably by a larger audience than maybe we've ever seen before. 5 p.m. How to build an R2 astromech. This is in room 213 CD. And so it is a smaller room. I don't think it will be a huge turnout in there, nothing that you have to line up for too early. But I think that it's going to be a really fun panel. So let's see, 213, looks like that's 118 plus 225. Actually looks like it's going to be about 400 people in there. So that's a decent size for that. I have no intentions of ever building an astromech, but they bring such joy to the convention. The astromechs bring so much joy there. I mean, all the droid builders in general bring so much joy. LA Comic Con, I mean, the droids there, and I was just thinking, like, man, if Disneyland just had 5% of this in Batu, I would love that place. And instead, I just don't find that much entertainment over there at all normally. But there's such an energy to it. And so hearing them kind of tell their story of how they build an astromech, how much, the last I heard, people were spending around 10 to 15 grand on the astromechs. So I don't know, with inflation and all the things going on in the world now, I don't know, an astromech might cost more than a car. Of course, cars are getting so expensive, so who knows. But that said, I think it'd be a fun panel to check in and talk about some diehard fans there. Same time, this is in a bigger room, North 200A, behind the scenes of The Boys Presents Diabolical. And we actually just started watching Diabolical last night, which is a series of, I believe it's 8 individual kind of 14, 15-minute short animation cartoons. And they all kind of widen the universe of The Boys. Like, it all ties directly into The Boys, but gives a lot more.
All written by different people.
Written by different people, animated in different styles.
Yeah, they all have kind of their own flavor to them and stuff. And so I think we watched like 4 of them yesterday, something like that. So definitely violent, definitely not kid friendly. not even some adult friendly, because I think many adults would take offense to some of them. But I found it
Very
amusing
dull.
and fun.
Yeah. Yeah, and they are really taking the comic book versions of the characters more so, would say, than the TV versions. Not that there's not a lot of overlap there, but for example, Huey is the Simon Pegg looking one that appears in the comics. And so those are there on display, and it's a lot of fun. Now, Kevin Smith is a character in one episode of the series, so I don't know if he would make a surprise appearance. I don't know if they will, how deep they'll go into that. Again, there, will be that question of does this end up being a virtual type thing or what? But it is in the larger room over there in the North 200, so there will definitely be a lot more room to kind of fit people in. And I like the idea it's one of those behind the scenes ones. This one, so it says, get an in-depth look at the animated anthology series set in the universe of the Emmy-nominated hit The Boys. Executive producer Simon Recopia from Invincible, The Dark Crystal Age of Dark Crystal Age of Resistance, and supervising director Giancarlo Volpe from The Dragon Prince and Avatar: The Last Airbender will take part in a Q&A. So you got some good pedigree there too, some really great work that they've had outside of this current thing there in The Boys, and so I think that will be an interesting one to check out there.
My guess is Kevin Smith won't be there because his panel's Friday, and then that would mean that he has to come out a second day.
Well, it said, so that's a good point. So on the program, it says Kevin Smith is at WonderCon Saturday only, but then he has a panel on Friday. So we'll see. We will see. Yeah. We'll to be determined. Now, when Kevin Smith came to PowerCon in 2019, he was just 3 days before, they're he's going to be here, and then he was there that day, and he walked the floor, he met fans, he had a panel, he did a lot of stuff. We'll see where he's at. I mean, I know he's been working on his films, he's been traveling the country. I know he was very concerned about COVID, but I know he also was vaccinating, he's been safe and stuff. So I think he's in a place now where he's okay being out around people, but I don't know that he'll be wanting to do, signings maybe. I'm not really sure how that part will work, but okay, let's turn over to Sunday then. And as I mentioned earlier, there's a big one to start the day off. This is the big, I think, movie panel of the weekend. This from Fox through Disney, obviously. Finally, the Bob's Burgers movie is getting its debut, which this has been perfect timing. We needed a pandemic for you and I to watch Bob's Burgers because we knew we would like it, or I should say I knew I would like it if I gave it enough time, but we just never got around to it. And watching these shows, that have 20, 30 episodes a season, it's hard in the world we live in now to want to make the time for it. But a pandemic did it. And so my sister's a huge fan of Bob's Burgers. We got into it. You loved it. I loved it. It became a show that we watched very consistently. We're all caught up. We watch it pretty quickly when it airs weekly now. And so now we live in a world where we'll be able to go to the movie theater to see the Bob's Burger movie because it got delayed so many times because of the pandemic that now it could come to WonderCon 2022. And so it says Bob's Burgers creators and cast come together for this first look at the Belcher family's jump to the big screen. During the panel, they will share never-before-seen footage and answer fan questions. So it says fan questions, but again, as you noted before, which is a great point that I hadn't even thought of, is we saw a lot of panels during the pandemic that answered fan questions. And the way they answered fan questions were they were elicited prior to recording. So we will see. But again, it's in North 200A. I would have loved to have seen that one in the arena, but again, these are different times right now, and it didn't make sense for them to pay the extra money to have the arena this year at WonderCon. Okay, 3 p.m. on Sunday, North 200A. So again, one of the large rooms. Shudder's Cursed Films. Now, I don't really know anything about Cursed Films, but what I do know is I really love Shudder. If you're a horror fan, you probably are familiar with Shudder. I heard somebody say before we subscribed to it, and it's a pretty cheap subscription service. I want to say $4 or $5 a month type of a thing. But what I had heard is that it was the most well-curated of all the streaming platforms. And I 100% agree. The way they move content on, the way they move content off, the way they group it, the way they theme it, director series. I mean, you can do your own film festivals pretty much, once a week with what Shudder does. So I'm a really big fan of Shudder. and most anything they do, I'm willing to give a look at. So it has my attention peaked there at the 3 p.m. slot on Sunday. Although by the time you get to the 3 p.m. slot, you're kind of getting to those last hours of Sunday, and you're getting ready for work on Monday.
It's very difficult to pull you from the floor at that point, because you're trying to soak it all up, because it's got to last you until the next big convention. So I can't imagine we'll actually go, but yeah, it caught my attention. I think when I read the description, they're talking about some specific shows that are coming to Shudder that are all related to cursed things or people or something like that, I think was what I read. But yeah, so it sounds cool, but I don't think we'll be there, because we'll be on the floor soaking up every last second that you can of the floor.
As we're coming, we've got a couple panels more here on Sunday. For those that are watching this as a video or live, if you don't mind, hit that thumbs up button. We really appreciate that. The changes of YouTube throughout the pandemic have made it very hard for our content to be seen by people these days, so we appreciate any little piece of support we can get there. So that's at 3:30 is the famous Talkback panel. This is in 213 AB. For the first time since 2019, Comic-Con International presents WonderCon representatives from Comic-Con International will be present to listen to attendees' feedback about the event, what we did right, what could we be improved. We want to hear from you. I really hope people are very kind in that panel if they don't like something. I mean, obviously there's always going to be people that don't like things and stuff, but I mean, I am so appreciative that they're putting the show together. I'm so appreciative of Special Edition. So I hope everybody is coming into this convention with that kind of mindset of like, hey, it's a different type of year. We're so excited to be back. I don't know that they're like, if people come in and they're like, well, why didn't you use the arena? It's like, well, the arena was expensive. I mean, it was like Special Edition. I hated not having the carpet, but the carpet's very expensive. And so I totally understand why they didn't have it, as they're kind of, bringing things back to life there. So I just hope a lot of people are there kind of giving them love and stuff. I mean, it doesn't hurt to say, hey, we missed my sketch. Is there any way to get that back? But again, a lot of these things come down to, I think, financial decisions, and they might need to get a few good cons under their belt before they're back zooming at full power there. And the world has changed in a lot of ways, and so I think there's a lot of stuff on this schedule that's going to add momentum to that, but it's going to take a little while. It's not going to happen overnight. So that's at 3:30 if you want to give your opinions there. It's 213 AB. The same time, this is something I think we've only participated in once, and we did it at Comic-Con, but it is a tradition for many, and it was something I enjoyed quite a bit. Dr. Horrible's sing-along blog and interactive Whedon musical. Actually, I guess we've done it twice, I think. We did it at WhedonCon as well. But anyway, Dr. Horrible's sing-along blog, a very, funny show. But having it again, everything about that one is about being around people that really love the content there. Obviously, we are in very strange times for Whedon fans, and I know even the WhedonCon has changed their name. I believe it's to Helmut Con or something along those lines. So it's a strange time for that, but I think, there may be some good in just all these people coming together and sharing their love of something there after kind of a hard pandemic, in addition to the reasons the pandemic were hard for everyone. But if you were all in on Whedon, like for me, Whedon's always been fine, but I've never been like all in. There's things I like, things I don't like, but it wasn't somebody that was, to me, the savior of Marvel or this or that. But for some people, that was a really huge part of their life, and there's been a lot of things to make him not very likable. He's done a lot of things to himself to make himself not very likable.
Yeah, definitely, and that's unfortunate, because there are so many people who appreciated the work, but I think in the end, in this type of situation, people end up having to separate the work from the person and appreciate, that it wasn't just the one person who did that work. So it is tough to penalize everybody involved when it was one bad actor type of situation, one bad person. So I think this is just going to be fans getting together, celebrating something that they love, and trying to work around or ignore or whatever the one person who made it gives it an icky taste or whatever. But yeah, I think those people who are in attendance are going to be there to be with each other, and I think that's not going to change, and it's a good thing.
There's a lot of value in that.
To be with each other.
4 p.m. to 5 p.m. in room 207, The Future of Doctor Who. It says it's an interactive and entertaining panel about what's ahead for fan-favorite sci-fi show Doctor Who, keeping the show fresh even with the return of previous showrunners. will be discussed by moderator Sandro Monetti from CNN and Time Travelers United cosplayers. River Alexandra Song, Karen Glover, Julie O'Malley, Christian Showman, and Cody Schoberg. So a group of cosplayers there discussing as well. So a fan-led panel. Sounds like a lot of fun. These are exciting times for Doctor Who, transitional times. It's a big anniversary coming up here, and a lot of things going on that I think a lot of people are curious to see if we're going to end up with like a, you know, shared universe HBO Max type of thing coming in the years ahead. We'll say with BBC what's going to happen. So fans coming together to kind of share some of those stories or some of those thoughts and concerns and likes and dislikes maybe and stuff. So a good way to end off there in terms of some of the panels that interest us. Now, there are a bunch of other ones here. Like I said, I mean, Kevin Eastman, we didn't even talk about. I mean, he has a spotlight panel here. He's always incredibly entertaining. There's so many. So obviously, I highly encourage anybody that's going to be attending WonderCon to take their time and go through this and check it all out there. In terms of some of our other content coming to just kind of keep an eye out for if you're interested, we will have our usual visual guide, or kind of unusual visual guide this time because a lot of things have changed. If you, the Hilton right behind us here is a lot of differences in there than it was in 2019. The Marriott, the surrounding area. We also put up just today a new video that's for our Patreon members over on Patreon. For the Parks and Cons crew there. That one is a downtown Disney guide. So we kind of walk through some of the changes, places to eat, things to do, all about downtown Disney. It didn't really fully hit me. I knew a lot of things had changed at downtown Disney since the last WonderCon, but then it really hit me. And it because kind of the weeks leading up, we were getting a lot of questions from people coming out for WonderCon for the first time in years that were like, hey, is this still open? Hey, I always love going here. Can I do that? Hey, is parking still over here? And I was like, oh, we need to do a video. So for our Parks and Cons crew, we appreciate you so much, and hopefully you enjoy that video, and it'll be helpful for your WonderCon planning over there. Once again, we'll look real quick at the schedule, some of the things coming up. I guess we'll kind of scoot out a week beyond this one, so some things down the line a little bit there. We have the Toyzilla Swap Meet coming. That is a little kind of toy show over at Toyzilla. That's on March 26th. And I should say you can always check out these things on our homepage. Hermel's always updating parksandcons.com in the homepage to check these things out and get links and stuff. Collector's Dream, another toy show, that is March 27th. WonderCon, of course, will be here April 1st through the 3rd. The Hollywood Show returns, the autograph show. That is going to be running April 15th to the 16th. Sticker Expo over at Frankenstein, April 16th to the 17th. And then San Diego Comic Fest, an absolutely fantastic old school comic show that will be running April 21st through the 24th. If you have not done so, please leave us a like, subscribe, follow along with us wherever you find us. Sharing, retweets, shares, Facebook, wherever you can is all greatly appreciated. You can find us at Parks and Cons on Twitter, Facebook, Instagram, TikTok, and of course YouTube. Wrapping up our look at the WonderCon schedule for 2022 from the Anaheim Convention Center. Until next time, we'll see you in line somewhere.